Okay, all right. Let's start with a round of applause so we get Zoe?
Yeah, okay.
As a Canadian student in high school, we learned all about Canadian history. Well, at least we learned what the government wants us to learn about. Last year, I was a student attending St. Michael's College School in Toronto. And during the Canadian history course, an information truck came to the school and talked in depth about the Native Canadians of our country. This is the first time I learned the truth about the injustice that is happening in our own backyard. Of course, when I was younger, I was introduced to Native Canadians through great war stories and great heroes, such as the Métis people and Louis Riel. But this was different. This is the first time I was told the truth. Upon learning more details about the residential schools and the other horrific things that the Native people had to go through, I literally felt sick to my stomach and felt as if our country had betrayed us. Upon returning home from this day at school, I researched it further with my family, and since then it has become a topic of great debate in our household, and a passion that we truly care about and try to understand. This is one problem of very few in Canada that has not been worked on extensively to fix. In the past hundreds of years, this has been going on, and not much work has been done to fix it, which in my opinion is inexcusable. The Native people were here long before any white settlers arrived, and they were living off their own land, causing no harm. The white settlers wrote that they did not have the right or the power to take away their land, but they did so anyway. They did not have the right or the power to take away their children and send them to residential school, but they did so anyway. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 was designed as the Magna Carta for the Native people of Canada. Its main job was to affirm the Native status and provide Natives with security. But throughout the history of Canada, we see the process of the elimination of the treatment of the tradition and the culture of all of the Native Canadians. In order to truly understand the land problem that is going on, we must first truly understand the bond that is created between the Native people and their land. Native spirituality is quite an amazing thing to study. It really opens yourself up to the understanding of how vital the earth is to life and how it affects everything that happens. But not only through religious and spirituality purposes do the natives create bonds with their land, through day-to-day life as well. They have lived off of the land in their respective regions for thousands of years. The major problem that is up with the treatment of the Native people in regards to the land is that we're using their land and destroying it. Multinational industries such as mining, oil, land, lumber, and gas, and the water, fresh water, is just destroying the essence of the Native people's land. I just want to pose a question to you guys now. Do you know what the difference between Aboriginal right and Aboriginal title is, or just right and title? Anyone have any thoughts? Yeah, Rin?
I think that if you're entitled to something, it's kind of just it's more like a right is something that's guaranteed to you, whereas entitlement is something like you expect and that you should get, but it's not necessarily granted.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty much exactly what it is. But in regards to Aboriginal people, it's the Aboriginal right is the rights to do inherent things that they did before the European contact, and unfortunately they can't do that right now. And Aboriginal title is the inherent right to land and the ownership of it and the right to access it for economic purposes. And I just have a quote that I want you guys to read here.
Press the space bar.
Yeah, it's not working. Okay, good. This quote. And just as you're reading, this was, as you can see, extracted directly from the Aboriginal Title and Rights paper by the Union of British Columbian Indian Chiefs. I have a story that is very closely related to this. Just a few weeks ago, I was driving to hockey practice with my teammate and his girlfriend in the car, and I found out that she is a Native Canadian that is not obtaining her status at the moment because of a deal that her grandfather signed in order to come be admitted into Canada. The government forced him to renounce his status of his future family, starting at the generation of his great-grandchildren. And as you can see, this is something, Native status is something that can't be bought, negotiated, or sold. But he was forced to renounce it in order to be admitted into Canada. He was from Ohio, USA, and trying to come to Ontario, Canada, to be more specific. This is not only against the Aboriginal Title and Rights Paper, it's also against the Human Rights Declaration by the United Nations. Article 13, the right to freely move, is hugely violated in this case. And as well, Article 30, none of your human rights can be taken away, is violated because of the closeness of the articles. The reason why different Native groups of British Columbia, for example, is a major problem in today's society is because of the Royal Proclamation Act. In this case, it actually worked against the Native people. The Royal Proclamation in 1763 stated that Native status is true and that they have control of their land. And the only way to get rid of it is through treaties created with the government. In British Columbia today, we are seeing many colonies of Aboriginal people that refuse to sign treaties, and therefore, according to law, still to this day, the land still belongs to them. But the Canadian government is so hesitant to realize this because of the major economic costs, such as an example is the Northern Gateway Pipeline, a $7 billion project that runs through 4 traditional Native claims. The Canadian government has been under intense scrutiny for this action, but they've also made a point of retaliation, which I at least find very interesting. They believe because the Royal Proclamation was made in 1763, that it does not apply to British Columbia because it was not yet settled by any European explorers. I don't necessarily agree with this, but it's what they're saying. In the regions that the Native Canadians did create treaties with the government, hardly any of them have been honored. Canada refuses to sign the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights, which puts the Native Canadians in a very tough spot to fight for their rights. They are being forced to take it up with the British Parliament still to this day because of they did sign the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights, and the treaties were made with them in the first place. If Canada just signed the declaration, it would be taking a major step forward in regards to the whole country with this injustice. The Native Canadians have started a recent stand in the past few years and are starting to gain a lot of momentum. Several court cases have been brought all the way up to the Supreme Court and have been ruled in their favor. These rulings are the fulfillment of the promise of the Royal Proclamation from over 250 years ago. The Canadians have reduced the land, in British Columbia especially, from native traditional landmass. They are now living on reserves that occupy 0.4% of their traditional land. But not only is their land vastly reduced, they aren't even on their land. They are just located somewhere that's convenient for the rest of the country. This isn't the only problem either. They are suffering through third world living conditions on these reserves and have ownership of nothing. The only way to fix this problem is to help them create their own income and help them devise their own plan to success. But the government has done a few good things in recent years. Such as resource management plans have been created. They are very helpful, and they are helping the Native people gain vital experience in occupations that are realistic and used in the modern world today. This experience will help create the Native people, give them confidence first of all, and help them be able to create their own income from their own resources and their own knowledge. And they don't have to rely on anyone anymore. Although the government of Canada has made a few good moves in the past years, the distance to go is still huge. Imagine being a person of a unique and amazing heritage and being discriminated against for no reason. Imagine being born into a situation that is destined for failure, both socially and economically. Imagine how generations of Native Canadians